Stories of Great Christians. From its radio studios in Chicago, the Moody Bible Institute greets its friends everywhere with Chapter 7 in the transcribed story of Peter Marshall, Chaplain of the United States Senate. This story is based on Catherine Marshall's biography, A Man Called Peter, published by the McGraw-Hill Book Company.
This is Catherine Marshall. I don't believe I've described Peter Marshall to you. Perhaps I ought to tell you what he looked like in the pulpit. Peter was a tall, well-built young man with the broad shoulders of a football player. His hair, which had been very blonde, was turning darker with the years. It was curly, never slicked down, inclined to be unruly. His face was handsome in a rugged sort of way. You saw it in a combination of gentleness and humor, along with forcefulness and strength. He seemed thoroughly at home in a pulpit, and while he preached, he frequently used gestures, but they were never strained or artificial. Most of his emphasis was made with his voice, an extraordinarily resonant speaking voice, flexible, dramatic, with a clear, precise diction. But more than these was the fact that under the impact of this man's praying and preaching, God became real to those who listened. But I'm way ahead of my story. Let's go back a bit. Peter had just been graduated from the seminary. In fact, he was still without a church when this interview took place.
Sit down, Marshall.
Thank you, sir. Dean Moore, I just don't know what to do. I don't like to bother you with my problems.
Well, that's what deans are for. You say 2 churches are calling you.
Yes, and I don't know which one to choose.
Well, what churches are they, Peter?
Well, one is the Westminster in Atlanta.
That's a very fine church. I know it well on Ponce de Leon Avenue. A very large church.
But deteriorating from what I hear.
Oh, that's right. It's had a few reverses, and the membership has dropped. But still, it's what you might call a big city church. It would be quite an honor for you.
I'm not greatly interested in that, Dean Moore. Then there is the Covington Church.
You've been supplying there, haven't you?
Yes, along with Barnett. It's a good church, a country church, of course. Very small, but the people are wonderful.
And you've been asked to be their pastor, too?
Yes, and that's my problem. I don't know what to do. I don't feel led either way, particularly.
Well, Marshall, I appreciate your coming, but really, this is something I can't help you with. It's something you'll just have to pray about.
I'm glad you're coming with me tonight, Brother Bates.
It's a pleasure, Peter. It's pretty dark early this time of year. I know I wouldn't like to walk alone in this part of town.
I don't mind that so much. But this Carson family, it's almost too much for me.
You mean Mrs. Carson being sick again?
Yes. And if it's the usual situation, Mr. Carson is probably stewed to the gills. 5 children, too. Oh, it breaks your heart to see them.
Carson's a sharecropper, isn't he?
Sometimes. I don't think he's worked a farm in 2 or 3 years. He works in the mill now. Works a week, gets a paycheck, gets drunk, works another week, takes off, and that's his life.
How'd you get to know them, Peter?
I met 2 of the children one day. Got them to come to Sunday school. Then I met the others.
No one's ever bothered about these people before, Peter. I guess we've been kind of smug and proud in the church.
Brother Bates, those are the people who need our help, who need the gospel, not those who attend regularly and have heard it all their lives.
Peter,
What have you decided about Covington? Are you going to stay with us?
Well, I don't know, Brother Bates.
We need you, Peter. Of course, we've all heard that a church in Atlanta wants you, too. We'd never be able to pay you what they would.
I'll never preach for money, Brother Bates. I'll preach where I'm needed most.
Well, you're certainly needed here. Peter, we're tired of just having student pulpit supplies. If we have a regular pastor, someone who could give his full time to this work, I know it'll grow and progress. And Peter, just look around you. Look at this section of town. You say you want to see a need. I say you won't find a greater one anywhere. Will you stay with us, Peter? Will you?
Kind of noise in here, Reverend. Sure you don't want to go outside and talk?
I want to see this car you phoned to me about.
That's right over here. Just took it in trade yesterday.
A Model A, huh?
Best Ford ever made. One owner, too. Only 12,000 miles on it.
That's very little for a 3-year-old car. You're sure that speedometer is accurate?
Oh, I'd swear by it. What I mean is, I vouch for it myself.
Then I'll take your word for it. Start the motor.
Okay.
Sounds pretty good.
Reverend, that little 4-cylinder motor is the best thing on the market. Believe me, really is.
His tires look pretty good. That front left one is getting kind of bald, though.
Well, give you a new one for it.
What's the price?
Well, being as you're the preacher here...
Besides that, I'm a Scotchman. I want a bargain. I can't afford anything else but a bargain.
I see. Reverend, how much do you need a car?
How much? Man, it would be the difference between doing a good job for the Lord and just a passing it. It's not only the church here in Covington. We've opened up mission stations in Gum Creek, in Pine Grove, even in Haston. I need a car to get to these places.
Mm-hmm. Tell you what, I allowed the man who owned this car $250. It's yours for $150.
That's the lowest you can go?
Yep, that's the lowest.
Well, at last I can buy something I can afford. I say, that's what it is, all right. Afford. Very good.
Mr. Carson will be glad to see you, Mr. Marshall.
Are you sure?
Oh, yes, he's wanted to see you.
Is he sober today?
Mr. Marshall, Joe hasn't had a drink in 2 weeks. That's the longest he's ever gone. Ever since he went to church.
Really? Where is Joe?
Oh, out of peace, working on the trees.
Let's go see him, huh?
Sure.
How are you feeling these days, Mrs. Carson?
Oh, much better. Haven't had a spell of sickness in over a year now. There's my husband. See him?
Oh, yes.
Joe! Joe, here's Mr. Marshall.
Howdy there. I was hoping you all would pay us a visit, Mr. Marshall. Ain't seen you in quite a spell.
Oh, I've been here at least once a month, Joe. Perhaps you don't remember.
Reckon I don't remember much about anything a month ago. As I recollect, I was mighty loaded.
Well, yes. What is it you're doing, Joe?
Tapping the trees. I collects the sap and sells it to the fellows what makes turpentine. Got so many pines on my place, I figured I might as well put 'em to work.
That's very interesting. You just notch the trees like that?
That I do. Then I nails the bucket in place. That's all there is to it. Of course, I still works in the mill.
I see. Why did you want to see me, Joe?
Well, now that you're here, Mr. Marshall, it's kind of hard to tell you. I had it all figured out, what I was going to say. Well, I'll allow I've been mighty impolite to you at times, chasing you off my place, but I want you to know that I'm really grateful for what you're doing for the kids and all.
Well, that's quite all right.
You know, we's just poor white trash to most folk round these parts. Kind of surprised me when you asked the kids to come to Sunday school. Didn't think people cared about us.
Has it taken a year, Joe? A whole year? For you to realize that some people do care?
I reckon so. You know, I was in church myself 2 weeks ago. Heard you preach.
Yes, I saw you. I was waiting to greet you at the door, but you didn't show up.
I knows I didn't. But, Mr. Marshall, you said something that's been bothering me ever since. About no man being too rich or too poor to come to Christ. You said he's too big to be shut up in any church, and that he wants to be with people. Any kind of people.
Well, that's right.
I never heard anything like that in all my life. I didn't think God cared for me. After all, I'm nothing but an old drunk.
Well, I don't care what you are, Joe. God does care for you. And I'll tell you more if you like.
Would you mind, Mr. Marshall?
Mine? Certainly not. It's a privilege. Because of so many like you who are coming to Christ for the first time. Carnes. Harry Carnes. That name seems very familiar.
I wrote you several times about 3 years ago. I'm from Atlanta.
That's it. You're the gentleman who wrote me from Westminster.
Yes. We've always been sorry that you didn't accept our offer, Mr. Marshall.
Well, I've been very happy here in Covington.
We've heard of the good work you've been doing.
Don't give me any credit. It's God who has been working.
I suppose you're wondering what brings me here.
Well, I am a little curious.
We want to extend our pulpit to you again.
You're calling me again to be your pastor?
Yes.
But you've never even heard me preach.
Many of our members have, here in Covington and in Barnet when you were still a student.
Mr. Carnes, I believe God wanted me to accept this post. I've seen the first conversions of my ministry here, and I don't feel that God wants me to make a change.
But, Mr. Marshall, our situation is somewhat different from when I last wrote you.
Yes?
We weren't too well off even then, as maybe you knew. We've been without a pastor for several months. Attendance was off, and there were other things. But now, well, things are a lot worse.
How is that, Mr. Carnes?
Well, we're still without a regular pastor, and it's a big church, physically, Mr. Marshall. Small attendance means our income is less, and we have large expenses.
But Westminster was one of the largest churches in Atlanta.
Yes, it was, and it still has great potentialities. But if we don't get a pastor soon, our congregation has decided to close its doors and merge with some other church.
That would be a great pity, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would. That's why I've come to you again. We need a pastor, and we feel we need you.
Brother Carnes, you need the man whom God wants in your church. And I don't know if I'm that man. I don't know if I have the experience for such a pastorate. But I'll pray about it, and we'll see what God will do.
And so we conclude Chapter 7 in the transcribed story of Peter Marshall, Chaplain of the United States Senate. This story is based on Catherine Marshall's recent biography, A Man Called Peter, published by the McGraw-Hill Book Company. This is another in the series of stories of great Christians which come to you from the radio studios of the Moody Bible Institute in Chicago.